In our last video, we talked about my plans for getting organized, and we took care of some low-hanging fruit by making a better place to store scrap lumber and other long stuff. But to really make progress, we're going to need a more comprehensive plan. When we moved into this place 5 years ago, there was so much going on that the shop layout just kind of happened. I brought all my benches and tools and stuff from Indiana, put them in the garage wherever they fit, and I've been using it ever since. It's not terrible, but over the years, there's some things that I've really gotten sick of. To make things better, let's try to take some principles from my day job that past me probably wouldn't have thought to apply in this context. Instead of thinking about tools as just a means to an end, a way to make cool things, let's try to think about them as a project themselves. So the tools in the storage system are now a thing that we can design. One common system for describing the design process is called design thinking. It's broken up into 5 or 6 phases, depending on who you're talking to, but they all walk you through understanding the customer, understanding their needs, their feelings. Then you kind of describe some requirements based on that. You come up with some ideas, build some prototypes, and then work your way all the way through to real testing and finally delivering the product. Let's take a look at how those phases apply to my jumble of tools.
It's easy for me to empathize with the end user in this case, since the end user is me. But for your sake, let's take a little time to figure out how I feel about the shop as it stands today. We'll start with the lathe bench. It does a great job of holding up the lathe, but there's way too much random stuff on it that doesn't have a home, so that's got to get fixed. Most of the storage space is appropriately used to store big tools, but the handheld power tools aren't great. Keeping them on a big open shelf like this isn't very space efficient, and they always end up a jumbled mess of cords after a couple projects. My main workbench has way too much inaccessible large shelf space at the bottom. It makes it super easy for me to squirrel stuff away and forget I even have it. The only thing worse than having too much stuff is keeping stuff you don't even know you have. I do really like the pegboard wall for easy access to hand tools though. All my wrenches, screwdrivers, Allen wrenches, they're all just right there ready to grab. Got to keep something like that in the new shop. It doesn't have to be a pegboard, but we'll see how we solve that. Behind the workbench, we have my collection of bikes. This seemed like a great idea when I first set it up, but in reality, it just blocks one of the garage doors completely and collects junk all around the bottoms of the bikes. And I really only need regular access to 2 or 3 of the bikes anyway, so I should sell at least one of them and store the others somewhere more out of the way. It would be nice if the bikes I use regularly weren't stashed in a cubby hole like this. Moto parking is great, so they're side by side right by the garage door. No need to change that, especially now that I got all that lumber off the wall with my overhead storage rack. There used to be a shelving unit here, but I got ahead of myself and got rid of it before taking this video. Obviously, it wasn't necessary to keep around. Buying the CNC router was what finally made me start this project, or maybe starting to get organized was what convinced me I had room to buy it. I don't know, chickens, eggs, something like that. So far, I've just unloaded it and parked it on a set of sawhorses until I figure out its permanent home. This other shelving unit isn't causing any problems, but I'm sure there's some stuff in those bins that could be downsized. The bandsaw is okay where it is, but having it against the wall like this makes it hard to make long cuts, so anytime I need to, I have to pull it out. So it'd be really better if it was more out in the open, or at least on wheels and mobile. And I'm not a huge fan of this smaller rolling tool chest. It's kind of cheap, it's only got a couple drawers, and that big shelf on the bottom is just another place where junk kind of collects. So I really like the other tool chest, but it's kind of silly that it's on wheels and stuck on a 3-inch ledge at the front of the shop. I mean, what good are wheels if you don't have anywhere to roll to? And the air compressor is tucked away just fine back here. It wouldn't hurt my feelings for it to be able to roll out easily, but I hardly ever need to move it, so that doesn't have to be a priority. And last but not least, we have my milling machine. It's in an okay spot, plenty of access around it, but the right side hand wheel gets awfully close to hitting the lathe bench when the bed is all the way to the right, so you gotta kind of watch your knuckles when you're turning it. It'd be better if that didn't happen in its new home. Well, there we have it. That should be enough information to start defining some objectives for this project. Let's move on to the next phase. Oh yeah, one more thing. You may have noticed that it's basically impossible to get a car in the garage. I mean, if you shuffle enough things around, you can do it, but it's not pretty. Because of that, we've only had the car in the garage twice in the last 5 years when there were hailstorms in the area. I mean, it'd be a big win if we could make that easier in the future. In the definition phase, we'll try to turn the user research we just discussed into clearly defined objectives. Here are a few design targets I came up with for this project. So purge unnecessary stuff and replace inefficient storage with something more effective. That's pretty self-explanatory. No wheels on the ledge and only wheels on the floor. Basically, if it's on the ledge, it should be there forever. And if it's on the floor, it needs to be able to move around. I want easy access to only the bikes that matter. Got 2 mountain bikes and a road bike that need to be ready to move. The rest of it can be hidden or sold. I want more small tool storage space. That's pretty obvious. I've got a lot of big empty spots. and not a lot of places to keep small stuff organized. And finally, I want to be able to easily park a car without crawling around and playing Tetris to get things to fit. So hopefully you can see the most valuable part of this step is that it clarifies and condenses all the information we got from listening to the end user. It's way easier for a design team to work with a nice clean list than to try to process all that random information from the first step every time you need to make a decision. This is usually the fun part. Now that we have some requirements defined, we get to think of all the ways we might be able to solve these problems. Now it's important to keep iterating, restarting, refining, it's a back and forth process where you keep trying new things and refining our ideas until we meet all the design targets in an elegant manner. Along the way, we can test our ideas out by putting together prototypes to see if we like them. A prototype is really anything that lets us test an idea that's easier to make than a real finished product. Sometimes that's a 3D print, or maybe a cardboard mock-up folded up, or maybe even a fully functioning product, but it's made using more expensive and faster manufacturing methods so you can iterate quickly. As long as it helps us validate the concept, it's good enough. For this project, I ended up creating a 3D model of the shop and all the big pieces in it. So a CAD model is great for understanding how things fit together, and it's way easier to move around 1,000-pound tools in CAD than it is in real life. Since all I'm looking at is the location and size of all the pieces, a CAD model is a great prototype for this project. If I was worried about how something feels, or if there was uncertainty about some complex behavior that's hard to accurately simulate, my prototype would have to be a physical object or something a little more complicated than just a model. I've thought about building a model like this for years, but I always thought it'd be way more work than it was worth, but boy, I was wrong. Between downloading close enough models from sites like GrabCAD and modeling up some quick representations of the parts I couldn't find online, I was able to get a pretty good model of the shop and all the important stuff in it in only a few hours. So once it's built, I'm able to play around and pretty easily try out lots of different scenarios. For example, here's what it used to look like to put the car in the garage. You gotta move the motos, you gotta slide this little bike to the side, you gotta carefully angle your way in to miss the shelves, and then squeeze out the driver's door between the car and the shelves. And once the car's in there, there's just no room left for anything. All the floor space is taken up, you can barely even walk around. So now let's work through our 5 design targets. We'll show the prototypes and go ahead and move on to implementation as we cover it. So that final couple phases, testing and implementation, we'll cover all at once. Our first design target was pretty simple. It's get rid of stuff that isn't useful anymore and improve our storage efficiency. So the extra bikes will either get sold or stored in the attic. Let's get rid of a few of them. This little rolling tool chest gets cleaned out and sold. The big workbench is going to get sold too. I really like the pegboard wall, but the rest of the storage isn't effective, and it's heavy. It's on the floor, not on wheels, so it's breaking a couple rules. Bye-bye. The shelving unit is storing a lot of stuff that we can cleared out and condensed, as we already discussed, so it's already sold. The leftover stuff is going to get moved to tubs along the high shelves on the wall. As a bonus, I also realized that I can add a small extension to the shelves along the wall, which lets me turn the storage bin sideways to squeeze a few more in. By doing this, I was able to completely offset the space I lost by getting rid of that shelving unit. Okay, that takes care of the big stuff that needs to leave. Next, I worked on rearranging the stuff that's left. After staring at the model for a little while, it started to make sense to move the mill and the lathe up onto the ledge. So they're heavy enough that I'm never going to move them. Getting them up onto that ledge where they can't move anyway is a great idea. So I tried a few different arrangements to see what worked best. The mill didn't fit to the left of the door very well, the table's just too wide, and if I put it to the right, there's a bunch of wasted space to leave room for the table travel. Putting the mill at the right end of the ledge lets me tuck the air compressor into the table travel area without wasting much space. I'll need to redesign and build a new lathe bench to fit the new layout, and the space to the left of the mill will end up storing my torch set and eventually a welder once one finds its way into my shop. Now that we're happy with the prototype, it's time to implement the solution. To get started, I recruited a friend to help me move the mill. It was pretty fun to figure out how to move 1,000 pounds of metal using only simple tools. We were able to get it done using a collection of pipes, 2x4s, and a floor jack. Kind of felt like an Egyptian building the pyramids. The lathe bench is just a simple plywood table with 2x4s for legs, but it's designed to fit the space exactly how I want, and I kept the shelf supports nice and low profile so I'd have room for the big tools like the miter saw and the table saw on each of the shelves. Now that it's built, we've just got to transfer the lathe from its old home to the new bench. More pipes and levers get the job done. Getting rid of the big workbench opened up some wall space that'll work perfectly to store my 2 mountain bikes. This keeps them easy to access but completely out of the way. I'm going to be hanging the bikes using a pedal hook and tire shelf. There are all kinds of these you can buy, but I ended up designing and 3D printing one that fits my pedals perfectly, mostly just for fun. The drop bar bike will stay where it is. It's already got a parking spot that works pretty well. Next on the list is figuring out how to increase small tool storage. I think the best way to do this in my shop, or probably any shop really, is with rolling tool chests. I started shopping around for tool chests with a workbench top, and I came across this little guy. It's got a fold-out tabletop for a larger work area when it's rolled away from the wall. Very versatile. I was able to find room for 2 of these along the left wall of the garage. That's where they'll live most of the time, but if I need to work on something big, I can roll them out and even fold the tables out for a full 4x8 foot workspace. I'm pretty excited about this. There have been so many times I could have used a big work area like that in the past. I went and picked them up with my little trailer, got them unloaded and out of their crates. Note to self, next time you buy something big with wheels on it, just uncrate it while it's still in the trailer and roll it off. While looking at the CAD model, it dawned on me that it'd be a lot easier to get out of the car if it's parked in the right bay instead of the left. That leaves the driver door unobstructed, and now that we've got things rearranged, there's plenty of room to park there. No more multi-step process, just pull in, open the door, and get out like a normal human. With all that done, I'd say we met the 5 design targets pretty well. We got rid of a bunch of stuff we didn't need and relocated the big permanent tools. The bikes are stored much better now, and we've got a ton more small tool storage. The car even fits without much hassle. But there's one thing we didn't cover, isn't there? Wasn't the whole point of this to make a place to store the CNC router? Stay tuned to find out how it ended up on the ceiling.